Following the defeat of Vorgray, the victorious nations met in the capital city of Greenland, LUGHAM, to discuss the suitable punishments for Vorgray and their allies. The nations present at the peace conference is as follows: Damura, represented by Tintamura, Klagus worshippers, represented by Zulkari, Orangia, represented by that Dingleberry, Greenland, represented by Flarux, Vorgray, represented by Player and Talese, Onyxian, represented by True Blockhead 101, Tanfold represented by Ohio and PC, and Blovakia represented by Gold Blovakia. Each nation were given a certain amount of points if a tie were to happen in the polling section, with the defeated nations having the least amount of points, usually 0.5, while the victorious nations had around 1 to 2 points. Practically the only rule of the conference was to not entirely annex or dismantle a defeated country completely. Now that we got that out of the way, let's see what the representatives chose to do with the defeated countries. If you want to see more of these kind of videos, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get into it. The first nation to be discussed was Orangia. Orangia joined near to the end of the war, believing that the combined forces of Vorgray and their nation could easily defeat Redamura. However, much of their navy were destroyed in an engagement in the Chasmerican Gulf, leaving them vulnerable to an attack. Redamura would capture some of Orangia's islands in the end. Orangia sued for peace soon after. Majority of the demands against Orangia were suggested by Redamura. These demands included the abolishment of Orangia's navy, 50% reduction of military, and 10% of Orangia's GDP as reparations to Redamura for the next 10 years. The only islands Orangia lost were the islands in the Endall Sea, which were given to Redamura. After these demands were presented, Orangia made repeated demands to lower the harshness. However, Redamura had remained persistent, refusing to let Orangia off easier. The demands by Redamura were accepted by the majority of the representatives, winning 71% of the vote. The countries who voted in favor of Redamura were Blovakia, Klagus worshippers, Onyxian, Greenland, and Redamura. Those who were in favor of Orangia were Vorgray, and Orangia itself, losing the vote with only 29%. With the Orangia segment completed, Tanfold was up next. Tanfold joined the war soon after the war broke out, cooperating with Vorgray to invade Blovakia and its allies in the D'Orient, which Blovakia used as a port to the Anzarene Sea, blocking any war supplies going to their nation from Greenland or any other nation. However, the harsh climate of eastern Blovakia made it incredibly difficult for Tanfold to take much land, making the already experienced Blovakian troops succeed in the front line. Tanfold would surrender following Onyxian's naval landings in their southern territory and Blovakia's capture of the Kurjorsen region in the north of their country. Onyxian's demands were presented first. Luckily he had made a document, so that saves me editing time. The demands in order include: any Tanfold military forces must withdraw from the D'Orient. Hollaberg will be ceded to Onyxian, including all state units present there. Onyxian troops will be stationed in Tanfold for up to a decade. Tanfold will not be able to have an army above 20,000 units. Tanfold will not be able to have a navy that surpassed the tonnage of 800. Onyxian will control Tanfold's sea trade. The current monarchy of Tanfold will be deposed, replaced with a republic. The newly established republic's parliament will consist of Tanfold officials appointed by Onyxian. It will be the highest form of government for 20 years. All Tanfold airships used for military will be abolished. And to finish off Onyxian's demands, Tanfold will have to pay 90 million crowns to Onyxian as a form of reparation. Blovakia represented their demands afterwards. Blovakia demanded the northern Tanfold region of Kurjorsen, due to the wide variety of resources present in the region and that they already occupy the region. The final demand against Tanfold was the creation of Son, a province in Tanfold with a pretty significant independence movement, so Vorgray and Tanfold can easily help each other in a war due to the state being quite mountainous. The vote surprisingly ended in a tie, with the nations voting against Tanfold being Blovakia, Clagos worshippers, Anixian, and Redamura, and the opposition being Vorgray, Orangia, Grenland, and Tanfold, but due to the point system, the opposition to Tanfold won, winning 5.5 points, and the pro-Tanfold nations winning 3.5 points. With Tanfold and Orangia done, it is finally time for Vorgray, the last nation to be discussed in the peace treaty. Vorgray was the most important reason the war broke out. After the expansion war, Grenland was determined to reclaim historical Airgren territories. Vorgray saw them losing on multiple fronts like the Skyland fronts, the Red Sea front, and the front with Bluvakia. The Vorgrens accepted the war as a lost cause with the naval landing in the Terngray province by Grenland and volunteers from Brunsland and Aprikosha. Vorgray surrendered following major revolts within the country, officially ending the fighting in the war. The first Vorgren lands to be discussed was their colony along the Chasmerican Gulf. The first option was to make the colony independent like many of the other countries in the area, but that was rejected. Another option was to keep it as Vorgren, but that was also rejected. The representatives decided to give it to Redamura, although not entirely, as they gave it to the Clagos worshippers, as a sort of religious lands I guess. Vorgren Arsensial was discussed next. Similar to the colony in Chasmerica, a few options were available, like making the colony independent, giving it to Anixian, giving it to Burgundia, or keeping it as Vorgren, which absolutely everyone wanted. Everyone pretty much agreed to give it to Anixian, considering Burgundia wasn't involved in the war and the independence movement wasn't that big. The main Vorgren colony of South Grey was discussed next. The proposal to make South Grey independent was popular amongst the representatives, including Grenland. But however, Grenland soon changed their mind, wishing to annex South Grey as a colony of their own, which everyone soon thought was the better option. The last segment of the treaty began, discussing the core Vorgren territory. The first land to be taken from Vorgray went to Widon, the lands being the bordering Candelo region which they lost in the expansion war. Bluvakia represented their demands next, annexing the following provinces: Asulstan, which was historical Bluvakian territory, Mahochan, and Tiliar, arguing they were national interest. Bluvakia also took half of the Osprey Islands, justifying that they would be strategic naval bases. And finally, Grenland represented their territorial demands, requesting the other half of Osprey Islands, and the Terngray state, soon to be renamed back to Airgren, with that concluding the territorial demands. The restrictions and reparations segment was next. Vorgray had to be limited to only 20 airships, 80,000 troops, prohibition on the manufacture of armored vehicles for 15 years, the same naval restrictions as Tanfold, demilitarization of the Mosher, Serral, Lavendor, and Northern Asho regions, and Kaiser Wulfric was to be replaced with his nephew. And for the reparations, Vorgray had to pay 225 billion crowns, 100 billion to Bluvakia, 50 billion to Redamura, and 75 billion to Grenland. Vorgray was understandably pissed about this. Just over half of their economy went to the victorious nations, but it looked like Grenland was not gonna let them off easy. As expected, the victorious nations won the poll once more, winning with 71% of the vote, supported by Bluvakia, Clagos worshippers, Anixian, Redamura and Grenland, and the defeated nations losing with 29% of the vote, the nations voting against the demands being Vorgray and Orangia. And with that, the treaty has concluded. Do you think the treaty was too harsh in the defeated nations? Let me know in the comments. Thank you to the representatives of the nation who made this video possible. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.